So I want to shoot a real quick video, kind of bring people up to speed on the 34, fill you in on the timeline of the car, who owned the car, at what point in time they owned it, give you some history on Walter Ash and some of the information that he passed on to me. You know, a lot of people are saying that they turned the car into a high boy and they put it on a new frame and all this other stuff. Well, I don't want to go that route. I consider the body of the car a survivor because it's been preserved so good. But as an entire hot rod, I don't consider this car a survivor. If it was a survivor, if this car was built in 62, 63, driven, let's just say, till 68 or 69, and then tucked away in a building, and I essentially got the car untouched the way it was built in 62, that's a survivor hot rod as far as I'm concerned. But the car has been changed so many times, and it's not simple modifications. It's not like they just changed the fenders or they put a different interior in it or swapped the motor. It's major things that were changed. So, and unfortunately, there are things where you kind of can't unwind. I'm not going to unchop this car. It's just, that's part of the history's car. I've always wanted an old East Coast hot rod. The person that owned it before me thought that a hot rod isn't a hot rod unless it's chopped and channeled. So that's what he did. So I'm going to take you a walk around car and we'll check it out. These fenders are a spare tire cover from a 35-36 Ford. People have asked me to show how the fenders are mounted. So the fender's pretty straightforward. You got round bar welded to the back side of the fender, which goes all the way to the outside. Couple of small tabs that are welded, and they mount right on the backing plates. It's really straightforward. I've made a few other sets of fenders and braces myself for my other cars. I've done them differently, but ultimately it's the same setup. To talk more about the frame in the front frame section seems to be a big topic with everybody. When George built the car, George didn't extend the frame. All George did was he removed the cross member and then just cut the frame horns off and then welded the cross member in the front. So the frame itself stayed the same length. However, Brad Barrows added 3 inches to the frame in the mid-80s. That was done here. You can actually see it. You see a weld here and a weld there. There were 3 inches added because Brad wanted to run the 371 with a mechanical fan and the radiator behind that front cross member, which was way up further. So in order to do that, he had to add 3 inches to the frame. I left that 3 inches on the frame. I didn't remove that because to do that would just be foolish. So all I did was went online, got the exact measurement of what the wheelbase was and where things needed to be, and I welded Model A front cross member on the frame rails where they needed to be, and that put my wheelbase back to stock. A lot of guys say the wheelbase was fine. It was 120 inches. So moving the axle back puts it closer to where the weight is from the motor. It's going to ride the way it's supposed to ride. I chopped the windshield frame. I put this back in. This entire mechanism was seized completely. I got that freed up. The hinges were seized. I got those freed up. I found an older set of 33, 34 door handles. Put those on. So some of you guys will realize this. The people that really know 33, 34 Fords are going to realize this. So the car is a 34 Ford. There's a few ways you can tell it's a 34 Ford. That small hole right there is for the back hood latch. There's another small provision up top on the front where the hood would rest. There's an indent. That's also a way to tell. Another way to tell it's a 34 is this wing here inside of the both driver's and passenger window. What would happen is as you would roll the window up, you can see there's a space. The window actually slides backwards into this channel, and if you were for smoking, it's a smoker's window, and it would pull the smoke out of a car. If you look at the inside of the door, so this is a 34 door because we have the smoker's window. However, you have a 33 style inside door latch. 34 door latch are back here. So this is a 33 inner structure on a 34 outer structure. So essentially what that means is this was a really early 1934 coupe body that was built. Just a small, cool little detail that a lot of people wouldn't notice. I figured that out just from talking to people, asking lots of questions. So the car was chopped. It was chopped 4 inches, and he added that 3/4 of an inch, which is pretty typical. The typical back then. It's not always the way people do it now. People chop these cars differently now to give them a different look. The way they chop them now is they lean this back window in. They do a lot more modification here on the 2 rear corners of the roof. And what that does is it doesn't give it this bulbous look on the rear. So this is an earlier way to chop and configure the roof. They would just notch it, drop the window down, and then do their slices, get their their pie cuts, and they would just make everything fit. So the chop needs some more work. I'm going to deal with that way down the road. So going back, the car was built with a Model A front axle with Model A split wishbones. A lot of guys run this Model A split wishbones because they're shorter. They're not as strong as some of the later ones, but they work. They work fine. And what's good about these is I'll pie cut these. They'll line up essentially right where the cowl meets the frame, and that's what I want. I want to keep the wishbone underneath the body of the car. I am going to have to drop the steering arms, so I'll heat and drop the steering arms when it comes time. This tie rod was the tie rod that was on the car when I got it. This is George Ryan built this. This is how the car was built back in the day. It stood the test of time. It's straight as an arrow. I'm more than likely going to reuse that. The car has a 55, 56 Chevrolet wheels on the rear. They're 8.5 inches wide. They're chrome reversed. They're in really rough shape. A lot of people have given me, different tips and different things to do to clean up this rust. I'm not even going to bother, to be completely honest with you. The wheels are going to get changed out. They're going to be replaced. The tires that are on this car, Brad Barrows put on the car in the mid-80s. There is not a single crack in these tires. So they're a US Royal 820 by 15. I do believe. Yeah, 820. 820 by 15. I could run these tires. I may run these tires, but they won't be on these wheels. The taillights are original to the car when it was built in 1962. I don't know what they're from. Probably some type of an accessory light or maybe a trailer light. The license plate light and bracket was original to the car in 1962. I don't know if that's a Yankee or if it's a Hollywood style light. I'm not sure what it is. The deck lid has been replaced at some point. I don't know where the original deck lid went. There is zero turquoise paint anywhere on this deck lid. This deck lid's rust free and it's original 3334. It fits perfectly, zero modifications. So I'm going to run it. It just needs to be painted just like the roof. Perfect. Brad has 2 more of these tires at his house for me. I just need to go get them. I don't know what I'll do with them, but I'll use them on something, another project or something some other day. Originally when I bought this car, I saw this sticker, honey, and I didn't. After speaking to Walter Ash, I learned that Walter and George both worked at Honeywell, which is an electronics company. They make thermostats and things like that. George and Walter Ash used to work nights loading trucks at Honeywell, and that's where the 2 of them became friends. Walter Ash was never a hot rodder. Walter Ash met George Ryan and learned about this car as George was building it, became good friends with George, and told George, if you ever decide to sell it, I want to buy it. Well, when the time came to sell the car, he asked Walter, and Walter purchased the car. This is another little neat thing. The fact that, that has just stood the test of time is just another testament to the car being tucked away for all those years. So as I had mentioned before, the gaps are good on the car, just the way it sits. I'll show you the channel. Do I have a flashlight? I don't think I do. I hope you can see this. You can see where the heavy stick weld is welded. All the way down. And then back up where it was welded, you can see the little plate that was welded there. It's the same on the other side. It's welded all the way up the rear kick up. You can see, I'm gonna go get a flashlight. You can see the channel. This is all weld. That is about an inch of weld. It's welded. This would have been the floor here, which would have sat, they come up and then it would have sat right here on the top of the frame rail. It's welded all the way down and then up. You can see the frame is boxed. You can see the coil springs, how they were done back in the day. I can't guarantee I'm going to keep those because there's really not much space in between those coils. I don't think the car is going to ride that great. These are the bolt holes here for the shocks. I'll pop the deck lid off and I'll show you afterwards. The angle of the shocks was a bit extreme. You can see the posi rear end. I looked up the casting number, which is here, and it denotes that the rear axle is in fact, I believe, a 58 Chevrolet. And has a 350 something rear axle gear ratio. I'm not certain exactly what it is. I picked up a set of remanufactured deck lid hinges, repopped. I need to heat them and modify them. My bottle ran out of gas the other day, so I haven't got that far. So there are no patch panels anywhere on this car. A friend down in Rhode Island sold me this dash. It's a 34 standard because there's no ashtray. The rearview mirror was original to the car. And again, watch these doors. In the pictures that I got from Walter Ash, the car had a Volkswagen engine lid or engine cover latch on the deck lid. So that's how I know this deck lid isn't the original deck lid that came with the car, because it would be modified to accept this, and it isn't. So I found this on eBay, 15 or 12 bucks. This is a very common thing used back in the day. So that will find its home on the deck lid. You can see the pan hard bar that George Ryan had added to the car. Welded up here with a tie rod end. And then down here on a stud that's welded to the axle tube. Pretty standard for back in the day here on the East Coast. You can see the lower shock mount here. And the upper shock mount here. If I stand back, you can see the angle. Let me find something to put up there so you can see it. Here. You can see the angle of the shocks. Look at that. So I don't think this car rode all that great, to be completely honest with you. So I'll be more than likely changing the rear suspension slightly. I'm going to drive it the way it is now, but in the event it doesn't drive as nice as I want it to, I'll be changing that in the future. What else? Obviously the roof filler, I removed it. Cleaned it up a little bit, just hit it with some rattle can paint just so it didn't flash rust. I have all the material, the foam, the chicken wire, everything to recreate this. I don't know if I'm going to put it in or not. I might just enjoy the car with it with the roof off, because these cars get awfully hot when you're driving them in the summertime. So that's a quick walk around of the car. I have an original 32 grill shell that I picked up off a guy up here in Massachusetts. I may use that. And the reason, you know, I've said several times, I really love the look of the 34 nose. I hadn't planned on running the 34 nose on the car because I know the car wasn't built with a 34 nose. However, I have the original 32 radiator grill shell with a radiator. I plan on mounting that and running that with no hood at first. My plans are to bring the car back to Walter and take him for a ride in his old Hotrod with the 32 grill shell, so it looks like the picture. After that, I'm going to pull the 32 grill shell off, and I'm going to paint it to match so it'll all match. I'm going to pull the 32 off. I'll put the 34 grill shell back on. Whether I run the hood top or not, I don't know. But that's the plan. Run the 32 grill shell for now to show Walter, and put the 34 grill shell on after the fact and run it like that. I think the car is just beautiful with the 34 grill shell, and just love the look. This is the 34 radiator that I picked up from a buddy of mine down in Rhode Island. I haven't tested it yet, but regardless, I'm going to use it for mock-up. And then when the time comes, send it out, have it record if in fact it needs to be. This is the dropped heavy axle that I have. That's on the car now. It's obviously just mocked up. You know, I don't have anything, nothing's tight. It's all just in mock-up phase. Here's the front frame horns. These were donated to me from a man named Will Waite. He is a 33, 34 collector. He has a very large collection of cars, and he offered those to me for free to help me out. I've been struggling with my transmission, and I finally got the transmission I've been looking for. So it's in a mid-60s Ford 4-speed. I got the bell housing adapter with it. I have the flywheel, the clutch. I have everything I need now to bolt it to the motor and set the motor in the frame, and then I can start building my floor structure. This car was built with the motor set. The front of the motor was somewhere in this vicinity. And when I spoke with Walter, Walter said, because you had to sit so far back and your feet were way over on the side because the motor and transmission were all the way back here. He said you had to sit cross-legged in order to drive the car. And I'm not going to build the car that way. I'm not going to rebuild a car that's not enjoyable to drive. Walter Ash ended up selling the car in the 70s, I believe 1976, because the car wasn't safe to drive anymore, and he didn't have the knowledge to keep the car roadworthy, so he ended up selling the car. The car went to a gentleman named David Shannon. David Shannon drove the car until the late 70s, early 80s, when he blew up the motor. That's when Brad Barrows ended up with the car. Walter Ash paid $800 for this car when he bought it in 1963. Walter Ash sold the car to David Shannon for $1,500 in 1976. Brad Barrows bought the car in the early 80s for $2,500 and then sold the intake and carburetor setup for $1,000. So he was into the car for $1,500. And then I came along, let's see, if he bought it in, let's just say 85, it had sat for 35 years, and I purchased the car. Put the car back on the road. I'm not going to say I'm going to put my spin on it, because I'm not. I'm going to do the same thing that people have done for generations with these cars. I'm going to just get it on the road. I'm going to use the parts I have, use the knowledge that I have, and use the tools that I have. It's a 1934 Ford 5-window coupe. It's a car that I never in my wildest dreams ever thought I would own. And I want to see this car driven again, and I want to be the one to do it. So here's some of the paperwork that came with the coupe. This is the package with the title in it. It has a clear Massachusetts title. It's titled as a 33. When I spoke to Walter Ash in person and on the phone, he said that this car was a 33. But unfortunately, there are things that prove it otherwise to be a 34. However, this is a breakdown of the parts that are on the car. When I talked to Walter Ash, he said this wasn't his handwriting, so he doesn't know who did this at what point in time. But he thought that all the information on the car was correct. I mean, all the information that is on this piece of paper is correct. So as you can see, it's a 1933 Ford 2-door 5-window coupe, street legal. Paint number code is 1958 Chevy Turquoise, number 2961. Uses leaded high-test gasoline. The engine is a 1959. I'm sorry, I thought it was a 63. So it's a 59 389 two-barrel. Transmission's a 1959 automatic. It would have been the same, but in Pontiac. The front brake and brake lines are from 1940 Ford. Front wheels are 40 Ford, chrome reverse. Custom-made radiator. Front shocks are 48 Plymouth. Rear shocks, 1962 Oldsmobile. The rear end is a 1955 or 56 Chevy. Rear brakes are the same. Rear wheels are 8.5-inch chrome reverse. The battery is a 1959 Pontiac. The tires are Prowlers. Steering is a 1955 Chevy truck. Pontiac drive shaft, Chevy rear end, Volkswagen gas tank, electric fuel pump, and a windshield wiper, which you can see was right there. So that's all the information, the breakdown of the parts on the car. This is the title here. This is an application for a title that was filled out. I don't want to show any. April of 1978. So this would have been from, I believe, David Shannon. Yes, David Shannon. So he purchased the car. He applied for a title in April of 1978. So that is when he bought the car off of Walter Ash. And this is the application for Commonwealth of Massachusetts Registry of Motor Vehicles bill of sale for a non-titled motor vehicle. So this was from Walter Ash. His current address is still the same that's on this piece of paper, so I don't want to show it. So there's a little bit of a discrepancy. It looks like Walter Ash sold the car on April 26, 1976, according to the paperwork. But it wasn't until April of 1978 that David Shannon applied for a title, which is right here. So he waited 2 years. So I have the VIN number is still stamped on the top of the frame rail on this car. So I have everything, all of the documentation. I mean, that's pretty much it. Obviously, I want to again say thank you. I appreciate all the support and everybody watching the videos. I hadn't expected the large following that I already have received on YouTube, but I certainly do appreciate it. And I hope you guys stick around and follow along, because hopefully this car will come together pretty soon once work kind of slows down a little bit and I have some time to really just focus on it. So I'm hoping that's gonna be coming up pretty quick. So thank you again. See you guys next time. Bye.